What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Sloppy Saturdays. And today we have a very exciting video for you guys. We are talking about the quarterbacks in the 2027 draft class. We know this upcoming draft class at the quarterback position is pretty weak. Us and other people are talking about this 2027 draft class as possibly being one of the best quarterback draft classes of all time. I want to talk about a lot of different things in this quarterback draft class. I want to talk about each quarterback individually, where I think their ceiling is on where they could go in this 2027 draft class. I also want to talk about how all these quarterbacks have the opportunity to stay on course and be first round, second round quarterbacks in this class, because I know what a lot of you guys are going to say. It happens every year where we say, oh, this quarterback draft class is going to be great. Wait for this quarterback draft class. And it never happens. Guys, this is the class you want to have picks for in the top 10, in the top 15. This quarterback draft class is going to be absolutely unbelievable. I know what you guys are thinking, but believe me, this quarterback draft class is going to be really good. It has the opportunity to be really good because even if half of these quarterbacks pan out and be first, second round picks, like, again, I have 8 quarterbacks on this list, and then I also have honorable mentions as well that could also be in the first 3 rounds of the draft class. Like, there's just so much opportunity in this class. I want to talk about it all. Now, a couple of guys, like I said, I'm leaving off the list. I'm leaving off Sam Levitt because, again, is kind of a wild card. I think he's a guy that could definitely be in the first round of this draft class if everything goes right. I really love the way LSU stacked their chips this year. When Lane Kiffin went over there, I was a little skeptical because I really wanted him to stay and win a championship with Ole Miss. He did everything he could in the NIL and transfer portal. He had an historic transfer portal to build that LSU team around Sam Levitt. I think Sam Levitt has all the opportunity to be a first-round, second-round NFL draft pick. Again, just a little bit of wild card for me because when we saw Sam Levitt in his first year, I thought he was absolutely phenomenal with Cam Scadaboo and Jordan Tyson in that college football playoff run. But last year, he and Jordan Tyson were injured again. It kind of was just a wash. We'll see how he does this year. And then also another guy I want to talk about is Lenore Sellers. I think Lenore Sellers is really just an extreme project QB. I think when it comes into reading defenses and being consistent down after down and not taking sacks, he's not even close to where a lot of these quarterbacks are on this list. But again, when you look at a guy like a Lenore Sellers that's built the way he is and can run and throw, the physical traits, he's going to be drafted next year. It's just going to be a matter of when. Now, I really want to talk about my top 8 quarterbacks in this upcoming draft class, what I think about all of them. First guy up is Marcel Reed. Marcel Reed is a guy that's completely dynamic. When we look at probably the best dual threat quarterback in this draft class, when you talk about rushing upside, Marcel Reed definitely has the most rushing upside in this entire draft class. My biggest thing with Marcel Reed, out of everybody on this list, probably the first 2 guys on this list, I would say, he's pretty far away compared to my top 4 or 5 guys. When we look at him last year, he has a 62.1 completion percentage. And his team last year, I really love the way Mike Elko really set it up around him. Because when we look at Marcel Reed the year before last, coming in for Connor Wegman, we were looking at a guy that threw single-digit completions in a game. And he was really just looked on to rush the football, protect the football, and leave it in the hands of their defense. Last year, they built an absolute studded offense around him. When we talk about in the backfield, Le'Veon Moss and Ruben Owens. Last year, they had Casey Concepcion that's going to be drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. They have one of the best receivers in college football, Mario Craver, that's also going to be coming back this year. And then they also had Asher Bethel-Roman that's going to come back this year as well for this offense. They really set up this offense for Marcel Reed where he had to pass the football. And for a guy, like I said, that had single-digit completions when he first came into college football, he threw the ball 377 times last year. Now he comes into this year, and I think they built the offense the same type of way around him last year. You have a guy in Ruben Owens coming back that I thought was great when Le'Veon Moss was hurt, and I thought he was great in spurts for Le'Veon Moss. I think he definitely has the ability to be a number 1 running back on this team. They have Mario Craver, I think, is going to be one of the best players in the entirety of college football. I thought that was an absolute find from the transfer portal for them last year. He's a guy that could absolutely dominate in the slot. He's definitely going to be their slot guy. He's super fast. I think he's going to be able to stretch the field for them. Same thing with Asher Bethel-Roman, another small, quick receiver. Him and Mario are probably going to climb in and out of the slot, share the slot together. Then I think what was a phenomenal transfer portal add to make this a 3-headed monster, very similar to last year, is Isaiah Horton. When we look at Isaiah Horton, he's played in very explosive offenses when we look at him playing with Miami, with Cam Ward in that offense, with Xavier Restrepo and others. And then last year, he played on Alabama's offense, being a secondary receiver as well. I think he has the ability in college football and the experience playing with these explosive offenses to be very productive in this offense as well. I mean, we're looking at the second best transfer portal receiver in this transfer portal class. Not only that, why I also love the man in Isaiah Horton. This is a 6'4" receiver, very different from Asher Roman and Mario Craver that are like 6 foot and under. This is a guy that could really be a possession catch receiver, a guy that could go to over the top, bring something completely different to this offense. So again, very similar to last year, this offense has the ability to be the best offense in the entirety of college football. When we look at last year with Marcel Reed, he absolutely rolled through his schedule up until a certain point. My biggest issue with Marcel Reed, he's very dynamic. Like I said, he's probably the best rushing quarterback in this draft class. He has the ability to throw the football, like we said. He has the ability to extend the field, has the ability to make every throw on the field. But out of every quarterback on this list, Marcel Reed misses the easy throws more than anybody on this list. I think he's going to have to improve on that. I mean, we're looking at a guy with 62.1 completion percentage. He comes in the third lowest on this list. But my biggest thing with Marcel Reed that he hasn't proven yet, and I don't know if he will prove it this year in college football. And if he does improve this, I don't think Texas A&M could have a national championship type of expectation. He has to have the ability to stay in the pocket against top defensive fronts and win within the pocket consistently. Like I said, they breezed through their entire schedule pretty much. I know that South Carolina game was a little tough. They came back in the second half. But then when they played Texas and when they played Miami, we saw this offense dramatically slow down. Arch Manning had a great game against them. That was one of Arch Manning's best game of the season. And then when we look at Miami, that offense got completely shut down. They had a chance to win at the end of the game. Didn't happen. But Marcel Reed, when he plays these top defensive fronts, when they shell him in the pocket where he has no ability to run and make him win within the pocket, he was not able to do it last year. And again, I think it really comes to, again, not only his development, but also just how college football works. Like, he really didn't have to do that until the very last games of the college football season. So he didn't gain that experience without the season. But if Marcel Reed wants to go higher in this NFL draft class with how loaded it is, because right now I have Marcel Reed slotted in the third round. I think that's where he is. I think, again, he's a very exciting prospect, especially for how the new age of football is in general with dual threat quarterbacks. Again, this guy has premier rushing upside. And again, he isn't like super far away as a passer. I do think he was, like, again, proved drastically as a passer last year. But if you're going to be a successful NFL quarterback, and if you're going to have a national championship type of expectation, you're going to have the ability to sit in the pocket against top defensive fronts and carve up a defense. Marcel Reed is a guy that hasn't been able to do that for me yet. That's why he comes in at 8. But again, Marcel Reed has all the talent in the world, and he has all the talent on his offense. Again, you could argue this is the best offense on his entire list to develop even further as a passer. But as I'm saying this, I really don't want people to diminish the fact that Marcel Reed developed so much as a passer already. Like I said, this was a guy that came into college football where they did not even want him to throw the ball. They just wanted to protect the football and use his rushing upside. Last year, again, he's throwing it all over the field, but he just got to get consistent with the easy throws, and he has to be able to win within the pocket, not only for Texas A&M to win a national championship, but for him to be a successful NFL quarterback. What I see from Marcel Reed, like I said, I see third round, and I also see, again, him sitting behind a starter for probably 2 years, then getting a starting opportunity in the NFL. That's kind of my ceiling for Marcel Reed right now. He has the ability to move up even further if he improves dramatically as a passer. Another thing with Marcel Reed that I don't really like necessarily compared to everybody else on this list is his size. I mean, 185 is extremely small. If you want to rush the football as much as Marcel Reed rushes the football, you got to put on a lot of weight because, again, I think we're going to see Marcel Reed possibly be injury prone in the NFL if he doesn't get to that 200 mark. I think he could definitely get to the 200 mark. 6'1", we talk about all the time. It's not elite size, but if you're over 6 foot, you're 6'1", 6'2", that is not something where I'm going to stray away from drafting you. Would I like every quarterback to be 6'4", 6'5", 6'6"? 100%. But 6'1", again, is a good enough size for me. I just think Marcel Reed has to put on weight. And again, like I said it time and time again, going over Marcel Reed, just has to be more consistent in the pocket and has to be able to carve up defense and win within the pocket in certain big matchups. We'll see if we see that from Marcel Reed this year. I think it's definitely possible, but that's where he comes number 8. I think he's very far along as a passer compared to some of these top guys I have on this list. Number 7, we have Brendan Sorsby. Brendan Sorsby, I really don't have as much to say as other quarterbacks. For me, with Brendan Sorsby, it comes down to a lot of things. I talked about it. I think it is phenomenal that Texas Tech was able to get a quarterback like this. We're talking about one of the top transfer portal quarterbacks in the entire transfer portal. I think this shows a new type of movement in college football for Texas Tech. Them being able to get the top guys. I mean, we know a team like Texas Tech, they have oil money. They have one of the most NIL spending that you could possibly have. And I think for the Big 12, it's really in the future going to come down to just them and BYU. Those are the two teams that I think have the most to spend in that conference. And the two teams right now that are putting the most in their program. Now, when we talk about Brendan Sorsby, I have a lot of issues with Brendan Sorsby. Again, I do think it was used for Texas Tech to bring somebody like this in their program because I think they needed somebody on offense who's an absolute game changer. I do think Brendan Sorsby can be that for Texas Tech this year. I think his ability to be a dual threat quarterback is absolutely tremendous. I mean, when we look at Brendan Sorsby, he has the most rushing yards out of anybody in this list, which is kind of crazy. Again, you don't really look at him as a guy that's like a complete runner like that. And I think you definitely look at other quarterbacks on this list as more dynamic runners. But him having 580 yards and 9 touchdowns, this guy could really run the football. I think that's where his offense is going to be a lot different than last year. I don't think they had the rushing upside at the quarterback position anywhere near Brendan Sorsby. He's going to be that dynamic playmaker for them. My biggest thing with Brendan Sorsby, he played probably the weakest competition out of anybody on this list. You could argue him or Darian Metz that we're going to get into, but he only threw for 61.6% as a completion percentage, the second lowest on this list. I think he has to drastically improve his completion percentage. I think it's definitely a guy that takes a lot of shots down the field. So again, you may not want to read into that too much, but for Brendan Sorsby to really be a top NFL draft prospect and get into the first round, in my opinion, unless it's a really unique situation, you got to be at least mid-60s completion percentage. You cannot be at low 60s. And again, I think his play really tailed off at the end of last year, but I do think this is going to be the best situation Brendan Sorsby is going to go into at Texas Tech. I really love the situation for him just because, again, pathway to the college football playoffs and competition he's going to play. I think Brendan Sorsby, like I said, and Texas Tech has the ability to be the best team in the Big 12 by far. I think for Brendan Sorsby, another big thing we have to see very different from pretty much anybody on this list. I think Brendan Sorsby is really going to have to show in big games that he is that guy at the quarterback position. We haven't really seen Brendan Sorsby playing a lot of big games at Cincinnati and then at Indiana. Like, we just haven't seen it. So, again, I think he has to be more consistent as a passer. I think he's going to have to really, again, very similar to Marcel Reed, be more consistent on these easy throws. He's going to have to up his completion percentage to, again, 65, 66%. He has the ability, like I said, to make every throw on the field and to be a very good rushing quarterback. So I think, again, in the new age of football, he's going to be a guy that a lot of teams are going to look towards. But again, the other issue I have with Brendan Sorsby at Texas Tech, we talk about how good of a situation it is for college football when you look at pathway to the college football playoffs, and then some could go even further. I don't think Brendan Sorsby has some of the dynamic playmakers that almost every other quarterback on this list has. Like, again, I like a Micah Hudson. I like a Coy Eakin from last year. I think they're only going to develop further in the system. Kenny Johnson, I like that transfer out of Pitt, but like, I don't know. Like, I really like their running backs. Cameron Dickey, over 1,000-yard rusher last year for them. They were able to run the football pretty well. Jacoby Williams, a guy that had 800 yards for them last year, going to be able to run the football pretty well. But when we look at a lot of these guys, like, we're looking at guys with elite pass catcher talent. I'm still not so sure. Again, we saw this offense last year, got shut down by Oregon. And I want to say that Brendan Sorsby is going to be the answer because of how good of a quarterback he is and how much of a quarterback upgrade he is. And again, you look at another year rushing the football. They weren't able to rush the football against Oregon. But I do think, again, these running backs going into another year, I do think they're going to be top running backs in the country. But when we look at pass catching too as well, like, I feel like every other quarterback on this list has a more dynamic set of pass catchers than this Texas Tech offense. We'll see if people can make a big jump. That's why I'm a little concerned about Brendan Sorsby as well. I do think, again, he probably has the easiest pathway to make the college football playoffs out of anybody on this list, but he probably has the weakest set of pass catchers out of anybody on this list as well. Brendan Sorsby, like, to me, very similar to Marcel Reed, has to be more consistent as a passer. I do think he's going to be able to do that in a better situation, but how far is his ceiling, especially compared to the 6 quarterbacks I have in front of him? I'm not so sure yet. Brendan Sorsby, again, in mock drafts, he could go as high as the first round. I don't think that's going to happen. Like I said, I do think like I said, 6 quarterbacks in front of him. Has to be more consistent as a passer. I do think he went in the best situation he could have possibly went into when we look at college football playoff pathway, but I'm not sold on the Texas Tech offense as a national championship type offense. We'll see how it goes for Brendan Sorsby. At number 6, we have Trinidad Chambliss. This is the point in the list where we're getting a little weird because Trinidad Chambliss, I think so highly of Trinidad Chambliss. I think for me, he reminds me a lot of Cam Ward, where he has the escapability, where he's looking to throw the football, but he has that special type of magic where he could just further extend plays. I mean, we saw against Georgia, even against Miami, like this guy has the escapability to really, and he has that time clock where he doesn't take the sack, where he could extend plays super far. Trinidad Chambliss probably has the most eye-popping stats out of anybody out of this list last year, and he didn't even play the first 2 games of the season. When we look at Trinidad Chambliss, he completed 66% of his passes, which, again, if you watch Trinidad Chambliss and how many chances he takes to have completed 66% of his passes, I think that's unbelievable. 3,937 yards. He threw for a hell of a lot of yards, 22 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. That touchdown-interception ratio is absurd. He also has the rushing upside to take yards when he wants to, and I think he has the ability to be dynamic as a runner as well. We're not just talking about a guy with straight-line speed. 527 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns. I think Trinidad Chambliss has all the ability to, for sure, be a second-round pick. That's kind of where I had him slotted this year in a weak quarterback class. But part of the reason why I had Trinidad Chambliss as a second-round pick was because, again, we've seen this guy in Division II, and I think a lot of scouts and people aren't completely sold on him as an NFL guy yet. Because, again, obviously, when we talk about the story is a one-of-one story. It's a spectacular story. But, again, did everybody get it right as an NFL guy yet? I do think we have to see a little more of Trinidad Chambliss. Like I said, what did he play in? 10 regular season games, and then he went on that college football playoff run. I thought that college football playoff run was absolutely phenomenal. When we talk about Ole Miss with how much they had to prove with Lane Kiffin walking out the door in the middle of the season and them being able to go that far and really we're like on the doorstep of going to the national championship. I thought Trinidad Chambliss played phenomenal last season. My biggest thing with Trinidad Chambliss, very different to the other two where I gave you guys specific things they have to improve on. For me with Trinidad Chambliss, I just want to see more of the same. Like I said, he's a guy that played Division II almost the entirety of his college football career. I just want to see him stack together another good season on top of each other. And again, if he could do that, I do think this is a guy that's going to be in the second round, maybe in the back end of the first round as well. Like I said, I do think he brings up the dynamic as a rusher, extending plays that not everybody on this list, not anybody on this list really can do. I mean, we talk about Brendan Sorsby rushing upside. We talk about Marcel Reed's rushing upside. Obviously, we're going to talk about Arch Manning's rushing upside. But his ability to extend plays, have that internal time clock, and be able to look in the throw, I think he has a unique rushing upside that nobody on this list has. And again, for Trinidad Chambliss, we talked about it. He could have been the second-round pick in a weak quarterback class. I do think he's assuming a little risk because, again, if he doesn't have the same type of season, he could drop a lot. But I am very happy that this case did end up going through his way. I do feel like if he would have got declined, it would have been major risk. With this Ole Miss team and Trinidad Chambliss, I do think they have a very good supporting cast around him. When we look at Kawan Lacey, I do think he's a guy that's going to be one of the best players in the entirety of college football. We saw not only from the college football playoff run from Ole Miss, from Trinidad Chambliss, how spectacular he was. Kawan Lacey was also spectacular. I think Deuce Alexander realized the opportunity as a redshirt junior. I do think he has the opportunity to be one of the best wide receivers in the entire country. Being paired up with Trinidad Chambliss, obviously his upside is a lot higher, but I do think he's an absolute burner. I do think he has the ability to get open. I do like everything I'm seeing from Deuce Alexander out of spring practices. I really think he's going to be a one in college football. Then I also like the pieces they added around this offense as well. When we look at Darrell Gill Jr. and Jonte Cook coming from Texas, obviously he was a high recruit, and Darrell Green and Darrell Gill, both of those guys do come from Syracuse last year. I wanted to preface what I was saying because Jonte Cook did play 2 years at Texas. He transferred to Syracuse. Now he transfers to Ole Miss. Same thing with Darrell Gill Jr. He transferred from Syracuse to Ole Miss. Those are two guys with experience in college football. We look at last year, them having sub 500 yards. I do think it is important when you have a Deuce Alexander and you have a Kawan Lacey and you have a guy like Trinidad Chambliss that's pushing this NFL year to have experienced receivers around them. I do think those are two pretty big transfer portal ads. And then also I do think what is a huge transfer portal ad for this offensive line is Karius Kern. You could argue Karius Kern was the best tackle in this entire transfer portal. A lot of people like to say Jordan Seaton, but to have an upgrade on the offensive line as well. I think this offensive line is going to be phenomenal with 4 guys coming back on this offensive line and then adding a guy that could be the best player on your offensive line in Karius Kern. I think the offense is going to be absolutely spectacular. But like I said, when we look at Trinidad Chambliss rushing upside, when we look at him throwing 66% of his passes, 3,937 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. I think the biggest thing for Trinidad Chambliss is stacking one year on top of another in the SEC. If he has a very similar season to last year, almost makes the college football playoffs, and again, they go on a similar type of run as last year, there's going to be absolutely no question Trinidad Chambliss is an NFL quarterback. For Trinidad Chambliss, the biggest thing, very different than anybody on this list, he just has to do it again. That's all it is for Trinidad Chambliss for me. I do think he has the possibility to do that. I do really trust Pete Golden as a head coach as well. I know a lot of people have questions about him. I really liked him as a recruiter, transfer portal guy in this offseason. I think he showed that. And then him holding his team together in his college football playoff run. I really like Ole Miss's outlook this year, and I do think Trinidad Chambliss is going to have a really big year. It's just, again, there's 5 quarterbacks that I just like more than Trinidad Chambliss. That's how stacked this quarterback class is. This floor for this quarterback class is absolutely phenomenal. Like I said, I know you guys hear me say time and time again, this year's going to be great. This year's going to be great. But this year, 2027 for quarterbacks is really going to be great. Now we get into number 5. We were talking about Darian Mensah. Darian Mensah is a guy that I think was the most underrated quarterback last year. He won the ACC championship. I know a lot of people don't like me saying that. They were a 7-5 team last year, but they have a great conference in the ACC. Now he joins, I guess, an ACC rival, you would say, in Miami, who I believe going into this year is the best team in the ACC by far. I do talk about how there are some dark horses in the ACC. Like I do really like Louisville as a team. But Darian Mensah was a guy that I thought could have entered this NFL draft class. He didn't. But Darian Mensah, like I said, the most underrated quarterback in the entirety of college football last year. I really like what he can do as a passer. I think he's super accurate. I think he gets the ball out fairly quickly, probably quicker than anybody on this list outside of Julian Sayin. I do think he throws with a lot of anticipation. I do think his skill set is just perfect for this Miami offense. Like I said, this Miami offense is all about timing and quick throws. I think Darian Mensah is a quarterback that does that better than anybody else in this transfer portal cycle. And I do think he's going to be an upgrade over Carson Beck, which sounds absolutely insane. We know the story career Carson Beck has, but I do think when you talk about a consistent passer from game to game, Carson Beck wasn't exactly that last year, although he did lead them to the national championship. They had a chance of winning it. But Darian Mensah, I do think, again, has a way higher floor than Carson Beck has from game to game. We're looking at a guy that threw for 66.8%. He threw for 34 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions, so turnovers aren't a problem for him. He's consistent as a passer. I do think the hardest thing with Miami this year is going to be this offensive line. I just don't really have much faith in this offensive line at all compared to last year. I think this offensive line, again, they lost a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. As a tackle, Francis Mauigoa, that was a tremendous loss. And again, I think they're really relying on a lot of stuff in-house that doesn't have a lot of quality experience. And then you also add Jamal Merriweather as an ad from Georgia. A lot of people are super hyped over that ad. I don't really see it. Jamal Merriweather couldn't get on the field for Georgia, couldn't get in significant time. This offensive line is going to be the biggest issue. But for Darian Mensah, I really believe Darian Mensah transferred to one of the best situations you could have possibly transferred to. When he was pulling it all the way to the end at Duke, I was saying, like, what is going on with Darian Mensah? Why would he possibly stay at Duke? Like, this is a guy that's pushing his chips to the NFL this year. Why would he stay in that situation? Like, don't get me wrong, the situation wasn't bad, but why wouldn't he go to a top-tier contender? And then for Miami, it was the same type of deal as well towards the end of this transfer portal. Like, I get it, they were going for a national championship, so it's pretty hard to balance, like, recruiting and going for a national championship, but, like, they didn't have a quarterback for next year. Obviously, the money starts talking. Darian Mensah pulls out. He goes to Miami. Again, for Darian Mensah, I think it's very similar to Brendan Sorge. We got to see Darian Mensah really do it on a much bigger stage. We saw him have a great game in the ACC championship. Pretty big stage. But when I'm talking about stage, I'm talking about like teams with national championship expectations. Now he joined that team. I think that's really it for Darian Mensah. Can he do it for a team that's, again, much more talented? I think just as much as he's going to uplift everybody on his team, this team is also going to uplift him as well. Like I said, he has a lot of talent around him. I really like Mark Fletcher and Shamar Brown. Mark Fletcher, I do think, is going to be one of the best running backs in college football. He was one of the best running backs in college football last year. He returns. Jamar Brown, I thought, was a sneaky good secondary running back as well. I think he's a very good change of pace back. I also think this receiving core is going to be absolutely phenomenal. When we look at Malachi Tony, he has the opportunity to be the best receiver in college football next year. He is really that good. He's a guy that you can get it to him in space, and that's where I think those quick time and anticipation throws are going to be needed for Darian Mensah. But again, he's also a guy that could stretch the field as well. And then when you look at Cooper Barcade, I thought this was a phenomenal transfer portal ad. Cooper Barcade joined Darian Mensah around the same exact time. It almost seemed like they were a package deal. I think for Malachi Tony, a guy that's super explosive, to have a guy like Cooper Barcade last year that's a 1,000-plus receiver in the ACC, I think that's absolutely huge. I think he brings like a floor as a secondary receiver, a guy with experience. And then I also like Vandarius Jacobs as well. He's a guy that had 500 yards in the SEC, so I like him in his offense. I think his offense is super experienced. I think the defense is going to be really good, very similar to last year. I know a lot of people are a little hesitant. Obviously, they lost Ruben Bain. Obviously, they lost Mezendorf. But they get a blue-chip edge out of the transfer portal, an edge that could possibly be the best edge in the country in Damian Wilson going into this year. And then they also bring back a lot of guys. So I think this defense is going to be really, really good. My biggest issue with Darian Mensah is, again, he has to do it for a team that's expected to win, expected to be fighting for a national championship. And then again, the offensive line. He's going to have to get this ball out pretty quick. Unless his offensive line gels early, I don't know about this offensive line. It isn't as good in the trenches as last year, but I do really love the piece he has around him. When we look at Malachi Tony, like I said, top 3 receiver in college football minimum. Mark Fletcher, going to be one of the best running backs in college football. Cooper Barcade, I think. If you have Cooper Barcade as your second receiver, you are set. It's just going to be a lot of time and anticipation, but I do think Darian Mensah, super underrated. Like I said, a guy with 34-6 touchdown interception ratio, a guy that completed nearly 67% of his passes. Like, he tore it up last year. He's going to be even better on one of the biggest stages. And I do think he has the rushing upside to extend plays and take what defense gives him. Again, I would like to see him translate that a little more. But Darian Mensah is going to be really, really good for Miami. And I do think he has the ceiling. Again, I wasn't talking about ceilings as much. I do think he has the ceiling to be a first-round draft pick in the NFL draft. Like, I feel like people are just really sleeping on Darian Mensah. I don't get it. I think he's top tier talent. Then at number 4, we have Dante Moore, which is kind of crazy. When we look at Dante Moore last year, he was slotted to be the 2nd overall pick in this draft to the New York Jets. Now I have him as the 4th quarterback in this draft. Dante Moore, in my opinion, the best pure passer in this entire draft. Like, Dante Moore is ridiculous as a passer with the type of difficult throws that he can make. Dante Moore, 71% completion percentage last year. Thought it was a great completion percentage. 3,565 yards, 30 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. He did have 156 rushing yards with 2 touchdowns. My biggest thing with Dante Moore that he has to improve on, he has to get better in the bigger games. There's just flat out no way to say it. I think against Indiana, I really think he had no shot, which I thought was kind of surprising because Oregon against Indiana, he did have a really big interception in the regular season against them, but that game was a lot closer. Again, I don't think that game entirely falls on Dante Moore. I do, again, when you talk about 11-on-11 battle within the trenches, how great Indiana was running the football, the plays their receivers were making, like, they were just a better team on that day, and one player wasn't going to change that. But just the way you set the tone in that game early with a pick, and it just got worse and worse. I thought Dante Moore, the way he ended that season, was very sour. I do think he played great in a huge game against Penn State. A lot of people talk about Penn State last year. Like, hey, Penn State was an absolute disaster. That's a fact, but the game that Dante Moore won against Penn State, at Penn State in that whiteout environment, he's never going to play in a harder environment, even in the NFL. It's just not going to happen. Penn State whiteout is arguably the hardest environment to play in all of sports. That was a massive win for him. Like I said, just has to get better in the big game. I think Dante Moore really puts himself in a much better situation when we look at Oregon's offense than last year. I know they lose Kenyon Sadiq. I do think Jamari Johnson is going to be one of the best tight ends in all of college football. This receiving core is so deep. I think it's arguably the deepest receiving core in the entire country. You have Evan Stewart, who was supposed to be a top 5 receiver last year. He gets injured. He's going to come back. The Corey Moore, number 1 receiver in his class, arguably the best recruit as a receiver for Oregon that they've ever landed. You have Jeremiah McClellan as a 4-star that they stole from Ohio State last year that I believe showed flashes at the end of the season when this receiving core got hurt. You have Gatlin Barry, who has Olympic-type speed coming in as a freshman, as a 5-star. I think he's going to be really good. You have other 5-stars also behind them. Like, this receiving core is 6-7 receivers deep. Like, this receiving core is absolutely loaded. There is no doubt, in my opinion, that Dante Moore put himself in a situation where he's going to succeed if he is healthy. That's really all it is. Like, this team is going to make the college football playoffs. like I said, their offense is absolutely loaded. When you look at the running backs as well, Jordan Davidson, De'Aaron Hill, arguably the two best freshman running backs in the country last year. If Jordan Davidson comes back from that injury, and De'Aaron Hill is a really good running back as well, like they're gonna have a 1-2 punch. It's gonna be one of the best of the country. Like this offense is extremely deep. Also love the offensive line as well. There isn't really much to say about this Oregon offense. It's absolutely spectacular. They're going to be a top 5 team in the country without a doubt. My biggest thing is you were slotted at the number 2 pick. You're not going to be the number 2 pick in next year's draft because, like I said, I have 3 quarterbacks in front of you. That's fine. If you want to further your development and you're going to be a first round top 15 pick anyway, I don't necessarily mind it. My biggest thing is you're just assuming risk. You never know what's going to happen from season to season. Obviously, we saw last year what a Clemson, what a Penn State, what an LSU. You never truly know. I do think Dante Moore is an NFL quarterback. Like I said, I like his size. I think he's the best pure passer. I think he makes really difficult throws that not a lot of quarterbacks on this list can make. I just think he assumes a lot of risk. Like you had a layup to be a number 2 pick. You had a layup to be a top 5 pick in a weak draft class. Now you go to an extremely tough draft class where I rank you as the 4th quarterback. I don't necessarily know how much I like that. I don't know. You're assuming a lot of risk. I get it. Somebody like Justin Herbert did the same thing at Oregon. It worked out for him. I think it works out for Dante Moore pretty well. Again, he's not going to be a second overall pick. He's going to lose a little bit of money, I guess, but I think he's going to work out where he becomes a first rounder and has another year of experience that a lot of people are saying how he finished the season, that he definitely needed. But again, you're just assuming risk. I do think if everything goes well for Dante Moore, just stays healthy, he's going to be a top 10, top 15 pick. But I do like 3 quarterbacks in front of him that I really am eager to talk about. At number 3, we have C.J. Carr, and I think C.J. Carr, him and the quarterback in front of him, I'm really splitting hairs with. I love C.J. Carr. I think he is extremely accurate. I think he's arguably the most poised passer on this entire list. Completed 66% of his passes, 2,700 yards, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. My biggest thing with C.J. Carr is we saw C.J. Carr in an offense last year with a Jeremiah Love and with a Jadarian Price, the first 2 running backs that are going to be taken in this draft, and he was a first-year starter. We didn't really see C.J. Carr have full reign of this offense. This year, I think C.J. Carr and this Notre Dame offense, it's going to be extremely different. You have a guy in Aeneas Williams, who I think is going to be a really good college football running back. I love how Notre Dame developed running backs, especially on the Marcus Freeman. I think Marcus Freeman, you guys know, I think he's an argument for the best coach in the entire country. But I don't think this is going to be a rush-first offense. I think this is going to be completely different for C.J. Carr, and he has to prove in this style of offense that he could be a quarterback that, again, could throw for 3,500 yards and could be just as or even more accurate with that much bigger of a sample size. I also love how they really were able to retain wide receiver talent and also bring in wide receiver talent that has more upside than last year. Jordan Faison, one of the best receivers on the team, you could argue the best receiver on the team last year. I think he's in for a huge year. Jaden Greathouse, a guy that missed a majority of last season, but Jaden Greathouse is a name that you guys do remember. I didn't say a guy that dominates in the slot. He was huge in their college football playoff run the year prior to C.J. Carr, where they made the national championship. You could argue who's their best pass catcher. Him coming back is absolutely huge. I think Mylan Grand, the transfer out of Ohio State, again, Ohio State's room is just too deep. We all know that we're receivers. I think he, pure talent-wise, if everything goes right for him, can be the best receiver in this room. And then you also have Quincy Porter as well, another receiver ad from Ohio State. I mean, you're looking at these high-star Ohio State physical-type receivers. I think this receiver room is 4 receivers deep, along with Micah Gilbert, really 5 receivers deep. And I think it's going to be a completely transformative offense where I do think they're going to have rushing production, but C.J. Carr is really going to have to show he was poised with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price behind him. Now he's going to have to show how poised he is when it's all on his shoulders, and he's going to pass for possibly 3,000 plus yards. I love his size. I love his poise. I think C.J. Carr is coming in, you could argue, the best quarterback in college football next year. That's how good C.J. Carr is. I think he's a pure pocket passer. I just think he has the ability to extend plays when he has to, has straight line speed. But again, you're looking at a guy that's going to sit in the pocket and dice up defenses, a traditional type quarterback. I absolutely love Notre Dame's outlook. Like I said, I love how they built the team around C.J. Carr. I think their receiving core is more upside than it's had in the last 3-4 years. And I think it's really because they have the best quarterback they've had in probably the last 10, 15 years. C.J. Carr is a guy that could definitely climb to 2 or 1. At number 2, we have a guy that I think very similar of C.J. Carr to. But again, when you look at accuracy, anticipation, pocket passer, absolutely dicing up defenses, I have never seen somebody in their first year starting as developed as a passer as Julian Sain. Like, I would really have to think about that. When you're looking at a guy, his first year starting, and I understand what your guys' counter argument is going to be. He had a Jeremiah Smith, he had a Cardinal Tate, 2 first-round receivers. We get it, we get it, we get it. But for a guy that's first year starting to throw for 77% of his passes, that's absurd. Nobody has the ability to sit in a pocket and has the anticipation, accuracy, and timing as Julian Sain. He comes in my opinion, as the best quarterback in college football. But when we talk about NFL potential on this list, unfortunately, comes in at 2. Julian Sain, he has nothing to prove to me. Just stack up another good year because you have to stay in college football, and you're going to be a top 5 pick in my opinion. A lot of people don't like the size, 6'1", 208. I think the size is absolutely fine. A lot of people also want Julian Sain to expand his ability to extend plays because we get it. He came in as a top dual threat quarterback out of high school. I don't think he has to necessarily do that. If he wants to expand his game a little bit, maybe extend plays a little further, take a little more what defenses give you, sure. But this is a guy that's the best pocket pass. This is, a Joe Burrow. This is a Matthew Stafford. This is a guy that's going to sit in the pocket and consistently dice up defenses. Julian Sain is that guy, traditional type quarterback. The one odd part for Julian Sain, I think he's going into a slightly worse offense than last year. We know Ohio State offense is going to be absolutely great. He had 2 first-round picks in a Jeremiah Smith and a Cardinal Tate. And again, opposite of Jeremiah Smith, we saw year back-to-back where Emeka Egbuka was a first-round pick, and then we saw Cardinal Tate was a first-round pick. I don't think Brandon Inniss is going to be that guy that's going to be a first-round pick next year. I do think he's going to be drafted. I do think he's going to be a really good starter. But I do think Ohio State is you're going to have to depend on some freshmen to really take the load. I mean, you could depend on a guy, transfer portal guy in Devin McCain, but I don't really think it's going to be that. I think Chris Henry Jr. really is going to be the guy that's going to be the X factor for this Ohio State offense. Like, we're looking at a super recruit, and I do think Chris Henry Jr. is going to be getting involved very early. When we look at a guy that's 6'6", they're just going to be balls with his physical physique that are just going to be giving me balls right away before he even develops. And I think towards the second half of the season, he's really going to pick things up when he learns the playbook. I also think Jaquan Guilford is another guy that's an X factor as a freshman. He's an absolute burn, and he has really good size. I think this Ohio State offense is very deep, and I do think with the attention Jeremiah Smith is going to get, it's going to open up a lot of things for these guys. But again, you don't have that first-round receiver pushing their NFL year opposite of him like you had the last 2 years. And then I think Bo Jackson. Like, a lot of people hate on this running back room for Ohio State. I really like it. I think Bo Jackson, I think he showed flashes last year, and I do think he's going to be a really good running back. I do think his ability to be a top 15 running back in the country, I really like it. And then, again, we also have other guys behind him. A lot of people want to talk about a Legend Bay, a guy that's like a mix between a slot receiver and a running back. I do think he's going to be a nice change of play back when he gets going. I absolutely love it. Like, I think Julian Sain just stack up another really good year. We all know Ohio State is going to be a contender. And this is the thing very different than last year. When we talk about Julian Sain, when we talk about TJ Carr, Dante Moore, and again, Archman that we're going to get into, I believe their floors, like, how would they ever drop from being a top 2-round pick like the guys did the year before? It's just not going to happen. Not TJ Carr. My God. Julian Sain, one of the most accurate quarterbacks in his first year starting that I have ever seen. Julian Sain's a guy that, again, almost rivals Arch Manning for me. Anybody knows me knows how much I love Julian Sain. A guy in his first year that threw for 70%, 77% completion percentage in your first year, how much accuracy and anticipation this has. Again, you guys are going to talk about the receivers on Ohio State. Julian Sain has a large part in why Ohio State is the way it is. And then number 1, we have Arch Manning. I want to talk about Arch Manning a little bit. If you think there is any chance that Arch Manning isn't going to be the number 1 pick in this year's draft, you are absolutely crazy. When we look at Arch Manning last year, the expectations were completely unrealistic. We were talking about a guy that was the favorite for Heisman. He was in the Heisman race basically all year. We're talking about a team that was favored to win the national championship. They didn't make the college football playoffs. With all of that, Arch Manning was still talked about if he were to enter this year's draft class as being the number 1 pick off his potential. So he is guaranteed with how loaded this Texas team is to be the number 1 pick next year. And there's no doubt about it. When we look at Arch Manning, he's 6'4", 219 pounds. He has the best physical stature out of anybody on this list. When we look at him rushing the football, he's a great rusher. He rushed for 10 touchdowns last year, 399 yards. He also had a really good season, in my opinion. Like I said, it was a little bit of a mixed bag. I do want to see him play better against a lot bigger opponents. We saw him against Ohio State in the beginning of the year. That was just an impossible task. We look at Ohio State's defense now, 3 top 10 picks, and also an NFL mind coaching up that defense. For that to be your first starter as the guy, he was set up for an impossible task. Reigning national champions at their house. I mean, come on. And then again, against Georgia, I don't think he played well at all. So again, I do want to see him play a lot better in bigger games. But I do think what Texas did around him was completely phenomenal. I think everybody was a year too early on Arch Manning in Texas. I think this Texas team might be the best Texas team I have ever seen in my lifetime. When you look at Ryan Wingo, top 20 receiver, and then opposite Cam Coleman, you could argue a top 3 receiver in the entire country, best transfer portal ad in the entire transfer portal class. When you look at the running backs, I believe the running backs are absolutely ridiculous. When you look at Hollywood Smothers, Emily Brown, you're looking at 2 guys with Jahmyr Gibbs type of speed. Guys, when they hit the hole, they are absolutely gone, and they have the ability to catch passes as well. They're going to be super dynamic. I think you're going to see them on the field at the same time as well. When you look at the wide receiver 3s for this team, whether you want to give it to Edmund Mosley, I absolutely love Edmund Mosley as a wide receiver 3, but also Jermaine Bishop, you could argue second, third fastest receiver in the entire country, going to be an absolute burner. A guy that could absolutely slide in by the end of the year as a number 3 receiver. Because when we look at what they put around Arch Manning, you look at Hollywood Smothers, junior transfer, Raleek Brown, senior transfer, Cam Coleman, junior transfer, Ryan Wingo, junior. There is so much top elite talent across the board for this Texas team. But not only that, they have the experience in college football. They're all upperclassmen. So to slide in a guy like Jermaine Bishop, who's an absolute burn to his offense as a freshman, a team like Texas could take that chance. Then when you look at the defense, I absolutely love the defense. They have so many returners on this defense, but they also have Colin Simmons going into his final year, who I believe coming in the NFL draft could be the best defensive player in this NFL draft class. Arch Manning is going into a situation that's absolutely phenomenal. What we have to see from Arch Manning just has to be more consistent. I absolutely love the momentum he had finishing the year against Texas A&M and Michigan. Those were arguably his 2 best games. But we have to look at it. Only 61% of his passes, missed a lot of easy throws throughout the season. He has to get more consistent. But when we look at a guy that's 6'4", with the rushing upside that he has, with the arm talent that he has, with the pedigree that he has, again, with all-time greats in his family, there is no doubt that Arch Manning is going to be the number 1 pick in this year's draft class, and absolutely nothing is going to change that. That wraps up this episode of Sloppy Saturdays. Drop down below what you think of this 2027 draft class. Do you guys just think I'm blowing smoke yet again with another draft class? Or do you really think this could be one of the best draft classes of all time? Sloppy Saturdays is out.